Tonight, Israel vows an extended fight for months or longer to defeat Hamas. Global outrage grows.
The humanitarian situation is abysmal.
As hopes fade for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. A post-pandemic prescription for frustration.
It's unacceptable.
Wait times for healthcare in Canada reach a record high. Plus, a new standard for star power.
His marketing value will probably be more than what we've seen with Tiger Woods.
The big business of stepping up to bat for celebrity brands.
CTV National News with Heather Butts. Reporting tonight, Mirella Fernandez.
Good evening. The United Nations will try again to pass a resolution that calls for a humanitarian ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. A similar motion was put before the UN Security Council last week. It was blocked by the U.S. This time it will go to the Assembly. But even if it does pass, it doesn't mean Israel will halt its hunt down of Hamas in Gaza. CTV's Jeremy Sharon reports.
Bombardments and gunfire ringing out through the night in Gaza. From the north to the south, heavy fighting amid intensifying ground operations in the enclave. This is the beginning of the end for Hamas, says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But just days after blocking a call for a ceasefire at the United Nations, the U.S. says Israel needs to do more to protect civilians.
There's a gap between the intent and the results, and that's the gap that we're trying to make sure is closed.
Smoke covered Khan Yunis today as Israeli troops expand operations here. Injured Palestinians flooded this hospital in the region. A sniper killed my oldest son and injured the other, this man says.
The impact of the conflict on health is catastrophic. More than 17,000 people are reported to have died in Gaza.
This British-Palestinian surgeon says the devastation can't be compared to any other conflict.
The difference between this one and those ones is the difference between a flood and a tsunami. The size, the intensity, the ferocity.
The World Health Organization says nearly 2 million people have been displaced, seeking shelter anywhere they can find it. This family is sheltering in a Rafah plant nursery. The kids scream at night. Dad, the rockets are coming. The war is coming, this father said. We can't sleep. Outside this United Nations distribution center today, hundreds of Palestinians waited hours for flour. I have been coming here for 2 weeks. People have nothing to eat or drink, this man says. More than 250 Hamas targets have been hit in the last 24 hours, according to Israel's military, as it continues to battle Hamas fighters in Khan Yunis. Today, Israel said it is prepared to fight for months or longer to defeat Hamas, as mediators have indicated willingness to discuss a ceasefire is fading. Mirella?
CTV, Jeremy Sharon, thanks for that. At a pro-Palestinian rally in Toronto, one man was arrested, accused of assaulting police. About 500 demonstrators had gathered outside the U.S. consulate to demand a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Police say that's when an officer was pushed off his bike and shoved to the ground. Adam Mellinson has been charged and released from custody tonight. No arrests were made in Winnipeg after pro-Palestinian demonstrators took over part of the Human Rights Museum. They staged what they called a die-in, lying on the floor to mark the thousands of lives lost during the conflict. CTV's Alexander Hollick reports.
Never again is now. Pro-Palestinian protesters stormed the Canadian Museum for Human Rights Sunday, calling on the museum to bring attention to the human rights crisis in Gaza during the ongoing Israel-Hamas war.
We hope that the museum hears us ask for Palestinian voices to be heard.
The rally took place on Human Rights Day, 75 years after the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
It's also 75 years that Palestine has been occupied
The Nakba happened on May 15th, 1948, which has also been 75 years, so it's been 75 years of oppression.
Demonstrators say the museum does not mention the 1948 Nakba or the expulsion and flight of Palestinians. They also claim the museum excludes Palestinians from its exhibits.
There are exhibits that focus on genocides globally, but there is almost no exhibit that mentions Palestine and the Palestinian liberation struggle.
The museum says it does include stories that touch on Palestinian experiences. In a statement to CTV News, the museum says it has been working with the Palestinian Canadian community to develop new gallery content that will help Canadians better understand the human rights violations Palestinians experience every day. During the rally, dozens of demonstrators staged a 64-minute die-in, each minute representing each day since the current conflict began on October 7th, when Hamas militants attacked Israel. The die-in aiming to bring attention to the thousands of Palestinians killed by Israel's retaliation.
I feel debilitated by witnessing what's happening, and I feel as though I have an obligation to come here and stand in solidarity.
Protesters also called on Ottawa to help put an end to the ongoing conflict. Alexandra Hollick, CTV News, Winnipeg.
For many, the conflict is overshadowing Hanukkah. The Jewish festival is marked with the lighting of the menorah, enjoying fried foods and prayers, which this year focus on the agonizing ordeal of Israeli hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza. CTV's Tony Grace in Toronto tonight with the stories of relatives still waiting for word.
The traditions of the Festival of Lights illuminating this Jewish community center in Toronto. But among the celebratory sounds, families still living one of the darkest chapters in their lives.
Among them, my son, he was there with his friends around the border on a regular day.
Yehuda Cohen says his son Nimrod remains among the hostages in Gaza.
We know he was taken alive, and since then our life became not a life.
Also here from Israel, Inbal Zak, spending what she calls her saddest Hanukkah, looking for comfort with community in Canada.
We are praying for Hanukkah miracle, but it's not like every year that we are celebrating all together. This is Tal.
Inbal's family circle not whole, she says, until the safe return of her cousin Tal Shohei to his wife Addie and their children, who themselves were freed from Hamas captivity 2 weeks ago.
Without Tal, the family will never be complete. We will be happy only when they be home, safe and alive.
And at the foot of a Canadian landmark, the CN Tower, a display through dance. Finding moments of Hanukkah happiness with a flash performance of a traditional hora.
It's very important to lift some spirit, get together, and remember that united, we are strong.
A show of solidarity with families and a stand against anti-Semitism.
A lot of people aren't feeling safe to go out of their house, so we wanted them to know that, there's people behind them, that we are stronger in numbers. We wanted to come out and celebrate, but at the same time also remember that there are 138 people that cannot celebrate with their families that are being held captive right now.
Back here at the community center, the rabbi telling those gathered that they are all one family who this Hanukkah will be leaning on one another, both here and half a world away. Morella?
All right, Tony, thank you. Union leaders say the Quebec government doesn't seem to be in a rush to resolve issues that put public workers on strike. 420,000 are out, including teachers and social service workers. And on Monday, tens of thousands of nurses and other healthcare workers will join them. Unions are pushing for higher wages and better working conditions. They're calling on the government to hammer out a deal by December 19th.
It's pretty late in the negotiations. We need to start talking about the big issues at the table.
Union leaders say they may resort to a general unlimited strike, which would keep workers off the job indefinitely. But the province appears ready to wait it out. But waiting it out is something some patients just don't have the luxury of doing. A Vancouver Island woman is blaming Canada's long wait times for the spread of her cancer.
Is that this can't be, this is a nightmare that I'm just not waking up from.
Lonnie Atwood underwent surgery for a rare and aggressive cancer, but had to wait 10 months to see an oncologist for chemotherapy. She says in that time her cancer progressed to stage 4. And Lonnie's not alone. The Fraser Institute found that surgical wait times in Canada have hit an all-time high, and they're the worst in the Atlantic provinces. CTV's bureau chief, Krisinashkute, has more.
People living in the Maritimes are facing the longest wait times in the country for specialized medical care. According to the Fraser Institute, the wait time in Nova Scotia is more than 56 weeks, nearly double the national average. PEI comes in at second at 55.2 weeks, and New Brunswick at third at 52.6 weeks. Meanwhile, Ontario has the shortest wait time.
It's unacceptable. What they're going to do about it, I don't know. You know, it hasn't changed.
58-year-old Leslie Tilley suffers with severe scoliosis and was undiagnosed with COPD for 7 years before finally finding a doctor a month ago who discovered she has stage 4 COPD. She says she is in extreme pain every day, and it will be years before she can be admitted into a pain clinic.
If I make a dinner, I end up having to sit down for, the rest of the evening. I have to have a nap in the afternoon, and the reason I'm napping is because of pain. The pain sucks the life out of you.
Nova Scotia's wait time is a small improvement from last year's 58.2 weeks. Health officials say they're trying to catch up in a post-COVID pandemic environment.
We fell behind because we had to close down elective cases for quite some time.
This week, Nova Scotia's health minister says they are making improvements to healthcare and tackling the surgical backlog.
We've done an additional 1,000 surgeries this year over our baseline year in 2019.
But doctors of Nova Scotia says more healthcare workers and more hospital beds are needed.
It takes time to attract people, it takes time to train people.
Nova Scotia's premier has also promised to extend operating room hours, with physicians receiving a premium for after-hours surgical work. But even that is a balancing act for healthcare officials. Krisinashkute, CTV News, Halifax.
Just the word vaccine seems to evoke a groan these days. Vaccine fatigue is one of the many reasons Canadians aren't getting their shots, despite the increase in infections this time of year. But for some, it's about cost, and for others, access. CTV's Kamal Karamali explains.
While many Canadians are intent on getting inoculated,
oh, I just got the flu shot.
Others are just,
a lot of people at school are getting sick
of hearing about it. Vaccine uptake is low this season. Among the big 3 respiratory viruses, RSV, flu, and COVID. For the first time, a vaccine for RSV is available, but it's only for Canadians over 60. Perhaps the biggest obstacle is its cost.
We tell them the price, and then afterwards they would oftentimes just say, well, I can't afford this because it's over $250.
Ontario is the only province publicly funding it. Another hurdle is who can and can't administer it.
Pharmacists still do not have the injection authority for this particular vaccine. That will limit access because not only do you need a prescription for it, you will need to find somebody that can administer it.
Then there's the flu vaccine. Statistics Canada says after a surge last year, flu shot coverage has gone back down to pre-pandemic levels. In Alberta, a concerning low.
This is the lowest we've seen in more than a dozen years. So we have to go all the way back to 2010-11 to find vaccine rates that are approximately what we're seeing right now.
As for COVID-19, less than 15% of the country has gotten the latest shot, with BC boasting 23%, but Ontario with only 11.5%.
I think there's a lot of people that are kind of turning off of the vaccine messaging because they've heard so much during the pandemic.
Health experts say with staffing issues and long wait times plaguing hospitals across the country, it'll be a recipe for disaster as the respiratory illness season gets set to hit its peak. Marella?
No doubt. Thanks for that. A Moncton clinic that provides vaccinations, blood work, and mental health support at the city's shelters is searching for a permanent home.
It's a well-established, much-needed service, so we're really just shocked that we're unable to find a location.
The Salvas Clinic was evicted in October and temporarily has been operating out of a downtown church. At a small homeless encampment near a Dartmouth hotel, Halifax Fire responded to its third tent fire this week. The damage was minor. No one was hurt. A rural farm near Moncton has transformed into a place where the population's most vulnerable can turn their lives around. 21 tiny homes have addiction and mental health services built on site. Each is equipped with electricity and heat. Clean drinking water is also a basic necessity. New legislation for First Nations communities is expected to be tabled as early as Monday. The proposed bill is aimed at addressing access to clean drinking water and the effective treatment of wastewater. Canada's Indigenous Services Minister, Patty Hajdu, says it is the closest Ottawa has come to co-developing laws with First Nations. Tornadoes roared through the state of Tennessee. A toddler and his mom are among at least 6 people killed. Dozens more have been hospitalized.
Oh my gosh.
Twister set off explosions and vicious winds tore at local businesses. House after house leveled. Tennessee remains under a state of emergency after tens of thousands are without power. Coming up from the ballpark to the boardroom.
Ohtani has done it again! Santa Maria!
The biggest contract in pro sports shines a light on the power of celebrity branding. Shohei Ohtani may be worth $700 million to the LA Dodgers, but his brand could be worth billions. The baseball player joins a small, super successful group of icons like Taylor Swift and Lionel Messi, who get to cash in on being bankable.
Ohtani has done it again! Santa Maria!
They call him Showtime. Baseball's unicorn now has the contract to match his nickname.
He's a one-time player, once in a lifetime. So, he deserves all the money.
And Ohtani blasts it.
This weekend, Shohei Ohtani signing what's believed to be the biggest deal in sports history.
Next inning. There's a drive!
A 10-year, $700 million contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Grand slam, Shohei Ohtani!
His marketing value will probably be closer or even more than what we've seen with Tiger Woods.
Are you ready for it? But Ohtani's not the only celebrity cashing in on his fame. Taylor Swift is redefining touring success with a record-setting $1 billion from her Eras tour. And in soccer,
Lionel Andres Messi!
Franchises are shelling out millions for their chance at superstars on and off the field, in hopes of sharing in possible advertising paydays.
If I'm a marketing executive for the Dodgers, I'm actually just so happy today because I can plan for the future. I can plan for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
But while people like Swift and Ohtani make millions, economist Moshe Lander says the downstream effects are much smaller.
In terms of what's the net economic benefit, it's really not there. It's just one person is capturing a lot of the economic rent, and a little bit of the spillover filters down to people down towards the minimum wage end of the scale.
Economists say this is another example of how marketability and social media branding drive real-world value. And even if the Dodgers lose money on Ohtani, it won't stop other businesses from betting big on the next celebrity brand. Morella.
That it won't. Colton, thanks for that. Straight ahead, a stellar surprise. The bounce from Mars to Manissa, the rare rock that turned up in Alberta. An Alberta man heard the knock but didn't realize the visitor had come from so far away. It was a space rock that hit his home, a meteorite most likely from the asteroid belt formed around the same time as Earth. CTV's Alberta Bureau Chief Bill Fortier on the rare find.
Doug Olson's suburban Edmonton home is one of an estimated 2 billion houses on this planet. So the odds of a small rock thrown from hundreds of millions of kilometers away hitting it are infinitesimally low.
I feel pretty humbled being able to hold this.
This story began back in October.
And I was folding laundry here, and all of a sudden I heard a bang about right here.
Olson climbed out.
I would have hit somewhere right around here.
But he didn't see anything out of the ordinary until last spring when he was cleaning out his rain gutters.
So I found it in the eaves trough right here.
When he spotted the small black object, there was no doubt in his mind about what he had found.
I knew it was a meteorite.
My reaction was, yeah, this is the real deal.
Meteor researcher Chris Hurd now has a piece of that space rock in his collection at the University of Alberta. He says it was most likely bounced out of the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter.
This is really rare. It's exceptionally rare for any meteorite to hit a person or a building, a structure. So, and in this particular case, he was in the right place at the right time.
It's been named Menisa after the neighborhood where the rock made its earthly debut. Now, one of fewer than 70 meteorites ever confirmed and named in Canada. Each new sample, a well-preserved clue, helping scientists piece together the story of how our solar system formed 4.5 billion years ago.
It seems more than luck. It's almost like, who sent me this?
Doug Olson has been offered money for the small black pebble, but says his tiny piece of cosmic history is not for sale. Bill Fortier, CTV News, Edmonton.
After the break, still bringing home the dough. A 100-year-old woman's secret sauce to enjoying a long life. Most of us are happy enough to slow down as we get older. Not Antionetta LaMonaco. She turns 100 years old on Monday and likely will be working at her family's pizza place. She still pounds the dough and puts on the pepperoni at the place she helped open up decades ago. CTV's Jill Makashon shares her story tonight.
An apple a day might keep the doctor away, but it's pizza that keeps Antionetta LaMonaco rolling into the kitchen. Another shift at Sorrento's in Winnipeg's Kaboto Center. Long past retirement age, Antionetta is turning 100. And she is still helping bring in the dough at the family-run restaurant, working 3 times each week. It's a place where Antionetta is comfortable. An Italian immigrant, she helped start the business nearly 50 years ago.
I would wish this for anybody. I wish that for anybody to have their mother around as long as we've had her around.
Working side by side with her children and grandchildren, 3 generations finding camaraderie in the kitchen.
To be
happy, that's all. Just to be happy and be around family, that's what
That love and support is essential, but Antionetta credits part of her longevity to food, of course.
She eats twice a day. She has a good breakfast in the morning, like a really hearty breakfast, and then she does have nothing in between, and she has a nice meal. She also has to make sure she has a glass of wine with her meal. That's a sure thing.
A century milestone filled with family and good food. For this Italian Nonna, 100 years is celebrated with a cake, but it may be pizza that is the spice of life. Jill Makashon, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Happy birthday to her. That's a wrap on the day. I'm Morella Fernandez. For all of us here at CTV National News, thanks for sharing your time. Good night.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast.